Have you ever worked in an office where food mysteriously disappears from the fridge? You bring a lovingly made sandwich, stash it in the communal fridge, and by lunchtime, poof, gone. Now imagine if that kept happening, again and again. What would you do? Well, one guy had enough. And what he did next? It set off a firestorm. This is the story of a man, a fridge, and a lock that divided an entire office. Welcome to AITA Stories. Let's dive in. Our narrator works in an office building that has a shared kitchen and a communal fridge. You know, the kind where people stuff their lunch bags in the morning and hope their yogurt will still be there by noon. For most, it works just fine, but not for our guy. Let's call him Dan. Dan, like many of us trying to save money and eat healthier, meal preps. Every Sunday, he packs a full week's worth of lunches. Nothing fancy, just hearty, balanced meals. Sometimes pasta with grilled veggies. Sometimes chicken and rice. Whatever it is, he brings it all in on Monday and stores it in the office fridge. But then, lunch goes missing. Not once, not twice, but multiple times. Imagine the frustration. You're sitting at your desk, stomach rumbling, dreaming of your delicious lunch, only to open the fridge and find an empty spot where your meal used to be. Dan tried confronting it casually. A sticky note that read, "Please stop stealing my food," was stuck to his Tupperware. It was ignored. The next time, he tried using bright labels. Dan's lunch, do not touch. Still vanished. And the final straw? A full week's worth of prepped meals, gone in one day. Someone had helped themselves to everything. He was furious, and rightfully so. Now, here's where things get interesting. Dan didn't report it to HR. He didn't confront coworkers. No passive-aggressive emails. Instead, he bought a mini fridge. A small, personal, lockable fridge. Out of his own pocket, he tucked it under his desk and quietly started storing his meals there. No one noticed, at first. But after a couple weeks, people started talking. Some coworkers noticed Dan wasn't using the office fridge anymore. One nosy coworker, let's call her Karen, asked him directly. Dan, being honest, explained the situation, that his food had been repeatedly stolen, and he'd decided to solve the problem himself. Karen's response? That's not fair. What if others want to use a personal fridge too? Doesn't that create division in the workplace? Dan brushed it off, until the gossip started. Apparently, Karen told others. And before he knew it, Dan was being called selfish. Some even accused him of breaking the unspoken rules of workplace equality. Let's pause here. You might be wondering, wait, what? How does protecting your lunch make you the villain? Well, that's where this story takes a turn. Karen wasn't just gossiping. She took it to management. Yep, she told the office manager that Dan had a hazardous appliance under his desk, that it could be a fire risk, that it wasn't approved by facilities. And guess what? Management asked Dan to remove the fridge. So what did he do? Dan said no. He pointed out that the real issue wasn't the fridge. It was that people were stealing his food. He even offered to show emails and notes he'd left. But management wasn't interested. They said, rules are rules, and that no one was allowed a personal fridge. So Dan asked, will you guarantee my food won't be stolen if I use the main fridge? Silence. No guarantees. No camera installed. No investigation. Just figure it out. Dan was livid. So he made a bold move. He bought a locking lunchbox, a cooler-sized container with a built-in combination lock. Basically, a food-safe mini vault. Every morning, He'd walk into the office, place the locked box in the communal fridge, and go about his day. This time, when people opened the fridge, they saw the message loud and clear. Steel, numbers, a glowing neon label, locked, do not touch. That's when chaos erupted. Karen and her crew called it passive-aggressive. Others said it was childish. Some argued that it was an overreaction. But guess what? His food stayed safe. No more theft, no more waste. But the controversy didn't end. An anonymous note appeared taped to his lunchbox. We all share this space. You're ruining the spirit of community. Dan, exhausted, posted about the whole situation online, wanting to know, was he the jerk? Now let's talk about it. Is Dan wrong for taking matters into his own hands? For locking up his lunch instead of trusting a system that clearly failed him? Or is the real problem deeper? Let's peel back the layers. This isn't just a story about lunch. It's about boundaries. It's about respect. It's about what happens when people ignore small violations until they snowball into major confrontations. Dan tried everything: notes, labels, humor, management. Nothing worked. So he did what any reasonable person would do. He protected what was his without hurting anyone. But the reaction he got, that says something. There's a weird phenomenon in office culture. When you set boundaries, people get uncomfortable, especially if you enforce them visibly, because your boundary becomes a mirror. And that mirror? It makes people confront their own behavior or their failure to stop others. Let's be honest. Someone was stealing food, repeatedly. That's the root problem, and no one stepped in to stop it. Dan's locked box wasn't the issue. It was the truth it represented. That someone in the office couldn't be trusted. That management didn't care enough to act. That fairness wasn't being upheld equally. And that truth, it made people uncomfortable. So instead of fixing the problem, they focused on Dan's solution. Classic deflection. And now, let's talk about something more personal. Why does this story hit so hard for so many? Because in life, especially in the workplace, we're told to be a team player, go with the flow, and not rock the boat. But what happens when the boat is leaking and everyone just keeps rowing? Sometimes, someone has to stand up and say, "No more." Dan did that, quietly, firmly, without attacking anyone. And that makes him not only not the jerk, but in my opinion, the hero of this story. He set a boundary, and he stuck to it. And maybe that's the real lesson here. In life, you're allowed to protect your peace, even if it makes other people uncomfortable. Even if you get labeled selfish. Because if you don't respect yourself, no one else will. So, was Dan the jerk? Absolutely not. But what do you think? Would you have done the same? Or do you think locking your lunch is taking it too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you've ever had your food stolen at work, we need to hear those horror stories. This is AITA Stories. Real drama, real dilemmas. Subscribe for more. And don't forget, sometimes the pettiest actions hide the biggest truths.